The story kicks off in a medieval world where our main guy, Rio, wakes up inside an empty cottage. No furniture, no cozy bed, just a table, 2 books, and a lonely knife. But does he read the books or arm himself? Nope. He steps outside for some fresh air instead. Classic protagonist move. Surrounded by towering mountains, Rio checks his hands and mutters, "Water, come forth," and bam, a little splash of water appears. Magic confirmed. But how did we get here? A few days earlier, Rio found himself floating in a white, endless void. Before he could panic too much, an angel appears, reads his mind like an open book, and reassures him that he's not in the afterlife yet. The angel, whom Rio mentally nicknames Michael, cheerfully admits he's been lonely in this realm for years, but also breaks the news that Rio got flattened by truck Kun back on Earth. Ouch. Rio, being genre savvy, immediately realizes he's getting reincarnated. He tells Michael he just wants a slow, peaceful life. Michael says, "Sure, buddy," and reincarnates him in a place called Faya Magical World where only 20% of people can use magic. Lucky for Rio, he's one of them, and he's best matched with water magic probably because of that chill lifestyle request. Michael drops him into a cottage in the middle of the Rondo Forest. He stocked the place with food and 2 books, one about the world and one about magic. After actually reading the book finally, Rio learns how to summon water and starts getting the hang of magic. He even figures out that he doesn't need to say spells out loud, just imagine them. And boom, magic happens. Not bad for a beginner. He uses his water magic to fill up the bathtub, only to realize the water's freezing cold. Time to make fire. He tries the good old caveman method and fails miserably. But then, using some high school chemistry, he splits water into hydrogen and oxygen, accidentally freezes it into ice, then uses the ice as a magnifying glass to focus sunlight and start a fire. Fire unlocked. Bath achieved. Clean and relaxed, he realizes he'll soon run out of food. But going outside means monsters, and that tiny knife Michael gave him isn't going to cut it literally. So, he starts working on attack spells. His first attempt, Water Ball, is about as threatening as a water balloon. He tweaks it into Water Jet, but it still can't damage a tree. He switches focus to Ice Magic Stronger, but way harder to control. After days of trial and error, he becomes decent enough to form ice crystals, even if he still can't shoot them like projectiles. With time running out, he sharpens one into a makeshift spearhead and ventures into the forest. While gathering herbs, a lesser boar charges at him. Rio freezes in fear, pun intended, but just before becoming bacon bait, he snaps out of it, slides away, ices the ground, and skewers the boar with icicles. Victory, sort of. Turns out, lesser boars are the weakest monsters in the forest. Back home, he reads up on more monsters. Dragons? Run. Akuna? Don't even try. Just pray. Still, Rio's not giving up. The next day, he finds some fruit, and just when things are looking up, an assassin hawk dive bombs him. It uses invisible air magic, and he realizes running is pointless. So he traps it in ice. Thinks it's dead. Surprise? It's not. The hawk escapes with only one eye. Days pass. Rio trains like crazy, fighting weak monsters, fishing, refining his ice powers until he can slice through mountains. But every night, he returns to where he saw a Dullahan, a spooky, headless warrior with smoke pouring from its neck. They spar regularly, and while Rio keeps losing, he suspects the Dullahan is trying to make him stronger. One day, the Dullahan forges an ice sword and silently offers it to him. Rio accepts. Teacher vibes achieved. Then, the hawk comes back. Bigger, blacker, and angrier than ever. Yep, it evolved. It blasts through all of Rio's defenses like paper. In desperation, Rio grabs the Dullahan's sword and finally defeats the hawk for good. He gives it a moment of respect, realizing it evolved just to fight him. A worthy rival. But the world's not done with surprises. A dragon shows up and talks. Telepathically, Rio's shocked. The dragon's shocked he can use telepathy again. They have a chat, and when Rio shows the ice sword, the dragon instantly recognizes it. It's the sword of the Fairy King. Wait, what? The dragon asks what Rio did to earn such a gift, but Rio has no clue. They part ways, and Rio continues living his not-so-slow life. Meanwhile, Mr. Angel upstairs checks Rio's status screen and realizes he missed something huge. Rio has eternal youth. The last guy didn't have that, so Michael didn't notice. And as Rio enjoys his new powers, a mysterious red-haired boy washes up by the riverbank. Who is he? Clean wakes up with blood on his hands, a gun on the table, and a hole in his head. Yeah, not your average morning. He's completely confused, but vague memories start flashing through his mind, and to make things even weirder, the hole in his skull starts healing on its own. He remembers being someone named Chingru back on Earth, but now he's stuck with a new set of memories that belong to Clean Morty, an unemployed history major living in a city called Tinjin. Basically, he's now in someone else's body. Trying to make sense of it all, he digs into Clean's old journal. Apparently, about a month ago, Clean teamed up with a guy named Welsh, and the two started translating some ancient book. This book belonged to a mysterious family called the Antigonos, and even though Klein doesn't know much about them, his gut tells him they were a big deal. As he reads more, he comes across names like the Black Emperor and Tudor Kingdom, definitely not like bedtime reading. Clean noticed a missing page for June 27th. Then suddenly, a creepy note popped up saying, "The world will end and everyone will die." Talk about a morning mood killer. Before Clean could panic more, his sister Melissa called out. He rushed to hide the gun on his desk. She walked in, clearly suspicious, and asked about a weird noise. Clean blamed the clock smooth, and Melissa just rolled her eyes, fixed the clock, and walked out like she was done with his nonsense. He checked his head wound again. It was completely gone. Was healing one of his new powers? Maybe. He thought about his past and how his luck was always terrible, which is why he'd used a good luck charm the night he died. Melissa came back with breakfast and told him to rest. She promised to bring him some meat later as a reward for trying so hard to get a job. Clean felt warm and fuzzy, but secretly decided he had to leave the house to keep her safe. He went to buy bread. The shopkeeper was sweet. She congratulated him on graduating and said he'd land a great job soon. But Clean felt uneasy. Someone was watching him. He grabbed the bread and left in a hurry. As he wandered through the city, everything looked new and weird, like he'd stepped into a dream or maybe a side quest. He heard people playing card games that reminded him of his old world. Then, a coin fell from his pocket. When he bent down to grab it, someone approached. He pulled out his gun, just in case. Surprise, it was a clown. The clown invited him to the circus. Naturally, Clean went because when life makes no sense, go with the clown. But people were still tailing him, so he ducked into a random tent to hide. Turns out, it was a fortune teller's tent. She invited him for a free reading. He was suspicious because free usually means trap, but agreed. She asked what he wanted to know. He said, "Past, present, and future, please." She pulled out 3 cards. The first was the Fool, which meant a fresh start. Very fitting. Then, the real fortune teller barged in and exposed the one sitting with Clean as a fake. Right after that, the same creepy guy who'd been following Clean earlier tried to come inside. So, Clean ran home. Back in his room, he set up a ritual, lit the place up with papers and chanting and nothing. Until, bam, headache, voices, red glowing orbs. Clean screamed in pain. He suddenly found himself floating in a strange place surrounded by red and blue sparkles. At the same time, in other locations, a girl and a man were doing their own rituals. They ended up in the same weird space with Clean, her with the red sparks, him with the blue. The girl asked, "Are you the boss here?" Clean was confused but noticed that everything he thought about was actually happening. So maybe he was the boss. He sat on a throne that appeared out of nowhere and said, "You can call me the fool." The man and the girl looked at each other like, "Okay, we're rolling with this." Then came the talk about Beyonders, people who drink potions to gain magical powers from one of 22 special paths. They climb a ladder of power from Sequence 9 starter to Sequence 1 powerhouse. Cleen had no clue what a Beyonder even was. So, he told the girl, "Ask the other guy." The man explained, to become a Beyonder, she'd need to join a church like the Church of the Evernight Goddess. But that would come with rules. The girl wanted freedom, so he offered a shortcut: 2 potions, one called Seer, the other Spectator. Meanwhile, Cleen wondered if his powers meant he was already a Beyonder. Then, the girl asked him to witness her deal with the man. Cleen, still trying to figure out what was happening, just nodded along. The man said, "You clearly have insane powers. Let us handle the boring stuff." Cleen agreed to hold more meetings with them every Monday at 3 p.m., like magic therapy group. The girl picked the name Justice, and the man went with the Hanged Man, sticking to the tarot theme. Then someone knocked on Cleen's door in real life, and the magical world collapsed. He wrapped up the meeting and returned to reality. He realized it wasn't just anyone at the door, it was the police. Panicked, he quickly hid the gun and opened the door, only to be greeted by a detective. Not just any detective, the same guy who'd been secretly following him around town. Cleen, of course, pointed this out. The detective just smiled and said, "Let's say I was protecting you." Both detectives stepped inside. Plot twist. They also had powers and were Beyonders, though we only learned that later. Then came the bombshell. Nia and Liz had supposedly committed suicide. Cleen was stunned. He did not buy it. The detective said the scene looked like suicide and asked Cleen if he had seen anything odd. While they were talking, the second detective casually flipped through Cleen's notebook and read a rather alarming line, "Everyone will die." When he asked Cleen about it, Cleen was speechless. He just sat down and said he couldn't remember anything. The detective then mentioned something even more suspicious. They had proof Cleen had visited Mr. McGovern's house on the 27th. Cleen, still confused, replied, "You might not believe me, but I only remember what's written in that notebook." The detective informed him that Mr. McGovern had lost a gun, and they were sure it would be found here. Cleen didn't even argue. He showed them where the gun was and explained that he had woken up next to it yesterday unconscious and posed like someone who had tried to take his own life. Ever since, his memory had been fuzzy. The detectives said Cleen's story lined up with their theory, but they still needed to verify things. So, they were taking Cleen to a spiritual medium to read his memories. While leaving, they ran into a scene. A kid stole bread from a bakery and was being chased. One of the detectives caught the boy, but the kid dropped a chunk of wood onto the detective's horse, spooking it. In the chaos, Cleen bolted and ran until he could barely breathe. Then, just as water was about to fall on him from above, time froze. Uh-oh, that meant a Beyonder was nearby. Cleen made a run for it again, jumped into a carriage, and told the driver to go, go, go. Once they were far away, he told the driver to stop. But surprise, the carriage driver was one of the detectives. Then Cleen suddenly woke up again. It had all been a dream, or was it? Because the detective appeared again, introducing himself as Dan Smith from the Nighthawks. And guess what? Dan could manipulate dreams. Dan said, "We're strong at night." Cleen was confused. "We," as in multiple personalities. Before he could ask, a creepy girl appeared behind him, put him in a sleeper hold, and told him to relax. Cleen passed out. He woke up somewhere strange, greeted by visions of his parents, but then the girl reappeared and interrupted the memory. She was a spiritual medium digging into his mind. She asked about a missing notebook from the antagonist family. Cleen had no idea what she meant. When she pressed him about the Dalish and Nia were killed, Cleen suddenly pulled out a gun and shot himself. Don't worry, it was all a dream test. He woke up again, and the medium told Dan that Cleen was telling the truth. However, some of his memories were just gone, along with the spirits of Lish and Nia. Spooky. The medium warned Dan that this was uncharted territory and very dangerous. Dan agreed and told Klein he was still in danger and that they weren't bodyguards. Then, Dan hit him with a surprise offer. "Want to join the Beyonders?"